Welcome to the Success Times Happiness podcast, a platform dedicated to engaging discussions with inspiring individuals aimed at nurturing personal development. I'm Richard Thompson, your host, a father, entrepreneur, world champion Ultraman, and passionate about all things high performance. Our mission is to empower both ourselves and you to unlocking our fullest potential, recognizing that this life is no dress rehearsal. While I may not have all the answers, this show serves as our collective journey to uncover them. Today we sit down with Greg Layton, the founder of Chiefmaker, a transformational coaching business dedicated to helping senior executives and aspiring leaders navigate the path to high performance. Greg is a world-class performance coach, author, podcaster, with a fascinating journey that includes corporate leadership, studying with Shaolin monks, and coaching in high-stakes environments worldwide. His work at Chiefmaker focuses on empowering leaders with tools, strategies, and mindset to excel both professionally and personally, making him an inspiring figure. Expect to learn how curiosity and systematic thinking are key traits of successful leaders, the role of mastery and continuous learning in achieving long-term success, and practical strategies to embrace risk, build resilience, and drive peak performance. Let's dive into it. Greg Layton, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Bloody good to be here.
Now, you deal with C-suite executives or people in who are aspiring to get there. You interview some really high-profile corporate executives in Australia and overseas on a daily basis. What's the commonality between them all, do you think? Between the ultimate, like what sets them apart from Joe Average?
I think it's a really good question because obviously everyone wants to know, is there some sort of secret sauce?
What's the purple pill here?
What's the yeah, how do we take this, right? We'll put you in the matrix, we'll lock you in, we'll give you the training program, right? I was actually only just doing a podcast a few days ago, we're talking about what are the 5 big trends and things going on right now. And one of the things I mentioned was curiosity. This comes through time and time and time again that on any mastery journey, and it might be sport, it might be doing your tries, it could be anything like that. If you don't approach your day and your job with curiosity, you're going to cap out really quick. Curiosity kills ego. Right, and that means when you walk in a room, you're picking up what people are laying down, and so you can actually get to the bottom of problems really fast. I'm not saying all executives are like that. I'm saying the best are. And I think they're getting really outstanding results right now, and a lot are starting to maybe battle with the old school mentality. So I don't think it's a prerequisite because I've certainly seen plenty that aren't necessarily that curious, but the best I'm seeing these days are clearly they have that curiosity piece that's so deep within them. They're always learning, and they learn through all sorts of methods. Some just listen to podcasts, some read books voraciously or papers, or others just talk to other executives. So I think that's a big one. The second one is they appear to be really dialed in to how they can add value into the world. So they go, well, if it's a company level, they're sitting there going, if we align ourselves to the core need of our customer, and I really get a sense of who that customer is and how do I build a business around that to serve that customer. But they also view themselves as a professional services firm of one, and they're selling their services to a company and a board right now. And so they know that if they do a great job and they exceed expectation, and the customer might be the chair, it could be the CEO, and that's their number one customer, and they're going, oh, how do I make them look good? How do I help them make money? How do I reduce risk and stress in their life? Then they're going to kick ass and go super well. And if you think about it, if you're in a situation where you're not really trying to add value to the customer of the company or internal stakeholders, no one's going to want to talk to you.
Where do you think the position, or what's your position with respect to how you do one thing is how you do all things when it comes to people in those sort of high-powered positions? Because I'm sure there are examples where people are extremely curious, as you say, or agile, and just understand the value proposition that they're providing equally successful in work life, in home life. And I'm sure there are other examples where the opposite is true.
Yeah, you do meet a lot of very successful people that are incredibly one-dimensional. You would have seen this in your work, where people do great things in one aspect of their life, but they They wrestle in other parts of their life. It's super common. I think that's one of the great challenges, actually, because when you become this really senior executive or a founder or owner of a big business, you know that it takes a ton of hard work. That's unavoidable. People that think they can do it easily, don't worry, you won't be around for long. So you've got to sign up for that difficult journey. The ones that seem to me to get it right do maintain a level of curiosity and presence and to serve everyone they meet. But it seems to me they also get roles right. So roles at home, and they get that.
They understand where they sit.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And it's a fair, whatever they decide with their partner. Like I remember, I've had a husband and wife CEOs like about 4 weeks apart on my podcast years ago. CEOs of separate companies, very, very successful people. They just worked out how they're going to make home and their careers work, or as opposed to sacrificing, one of them having to sacrifice for the other. And I've met many who are like, we just decided as a partner that I was going to be a breadwinner and he was going to be a stay-at-home dad, or vice versa. So I think if you don't get the roles right, that just leads to all sorts of resentment and trouble, and it'll come back to bite you eventually.
Is that a communication piece?
Has to be. And a give and a take.
And is it the same role, is it the same communication piece in the coalface of a executive's role? How much of that is communication? How much is that the actual skill of the work?
Well, it's both. We talk about, but I just want to go back to the thing at home communication piece. I think it's also as much about curiosity in how the other is doing right now. Because if you don't have the curiosity, once again, the ego comes in the room, and then you're in this sort of, you're a bit uppity with your partner, and you're like, and then you're not really searching for what do they need right now. And that will immediately create some level of resentment. To answer your question about is it communication or skill set, there are two performance theatres of executives. For athletes, we always know what the performance is. It's when you run onto the field, you cross the white line, or the starter's gun goes, that is your performance theatre. In executive land, that's not actually so clear what it is. It took me years to work out exactly what are we preparing for. And there's two. One is the technical work of your role. Either for you, it's doing law, or it's the strategy of the business. That's a technical, you need a skill set for that. The second half is meetings and communicating. They're your two performance theatres, right? If you can't nail those two, then you're all at sea, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure we've all met plenty. I've met plenty of amazing communicators that were terrible at the technical part of their role. So boy, oh boy, could they talk.
Yes.
Right? Could almost convince you to anything, but when you ask them to do the back end of their job, terrible.
Yeah.
And we've met others who are absolute superstars technically.
Skill set, yeah.
But
hopeless at managing.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as they open their mouth or write an email, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Right? And then people can't see the quality of their work.
Yeah.
So those are the two performance theatres of executives. And if executives think about that and go, okay, well, how do I lift my game? The simplest tool is go, well, how do I just improve those two?
Have you found that the executives that are really successful have the plasticity or the growth mindset to go, I can change? Or is it more about going, well, they are my limitations, and I'm going to build a team around to support those limitations?
I think the best of them have the mindset that they don't have to be the best at everything. In fact, the best I've ever met go, well, I don't need to be the best at anything.
One thing that I learned so quickly in sport was that even though you are, let's say, the best at 3 things, it may be for the net outcome of the whole team that you only devote your attention to one of those 3 things and allocate or delegate the other 2, even though you might be better than the person you're delegating to out of those 2 things. But the net overall outcome of the team is better by delegating.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
You got to check your ego there. And
exactly. And you just got to let that go. I think there's an angle around understanding as a leader that as you sort of come up through the ranks, I sort of believe that almost all the top performers I've met are pretty close to mastery in one sort of skill.
Interesting.
Right. They tend to be the best in the company at least one thing.
One particular
pretty
thing.
Close to it, if not, right? And that just tends to be a trait across all of them. And because it's achieving some level of mastery or doing something that's really, really hard in your life is a bit of a playbook for almost anything.
Right.
And there's that, you go, oh, I've been here before. I know how to do this. and it just bleeds into everything else that you do in your life. So I do think that is the case. And then they go, well, okay, let's just form an amazing team of people that are better than me at everything else. And then eventually they work themselves out of even the job that they're the best at.
In an infinite game of business, and Simon Sinek talks about how business is an infinite game, and I'm coming from a finite game of sport.
Yeah.
I've struggled personally with the position of playing an infinite game.
Yeah.
How do the best deal with that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Well, it is like we talk about the difference between business and sport. Sport, the clearest thing is there's a time. There's a scoreboard right in front of you.
There's rules.
There's time. There's rules. And who's winning and who's losing and what are the statistics, and you get all that as you go.
I'm so comfortable there, right? I'm so comfortable with that.
Yeah. Whereas in business, it might be at least a month before you know anything real, 6 months or a year, or you might get results 3 years down the track.
And even still, even with the results, no one wins business.
No.
The goal essentially is to stay in business.
That's right.
And same with
it is for some. Others it's for grow it and get it out. And that's private equity kind of side. I've got 3 to 5 to flip it and go.
But I guess also that same can be said for relationships, friendships, marriages. The objective is not, you can't win marriage or can't win parenting. You just become the best version as you possibly can. It's an infinite game.
Yeah. That's mastery, right?
Right. But I struggle, I guess, in this early stages to go, well, you can get some pretty clear, very short-term goals, but what are we doing in the long run to be able to be sustained? Like for the last 5 years as an athlete, you're almost in this perpetual feeling of adrenaline because you're just like the next thing, the next world championship, the next KPI, the ability to improve my run by this point, or whatever it is. And then you get into the business, and then there are the wolves at the door, and there's immediate things that need to occur. But over a longer period of time, it's like, what are we actually? Yeah, where are we going here?
I want to take a circular route to this. Is that right?
I love this.
This could really go around. I hope I get back to the question you actually asked. Okay, so one of the reasons that a lot of athletes battle with this transition is because when you're an athlete, the first thing that's really clear is you are in flow 10 to 20 times a week, right? All the different warm-ups, then you're actually on the bike, you're in the run, or you're on the athletic field. And so what we get is that beautiful cocktail of drugs going into the body that are just so good for you. And it's like you're putting the best fuel into your body, into your brain, into your whole body every day, right? We go to the corporate world and the kind of stress we put in our body is completely the opposite. So the first thing you've got to remember is, from a biological and neurological perspective, you are feeding your body something different. There is no possible way you can feel the same.
Interesting.
Right. So that's really, really important. Now, that will drain you when you're at work and you're going, hey, I've been at this for 3 years. Where's my little hit that goes, hey, I just had a win? Right. And here's the other thing about business, particularly in the early years, right? It's freaking unpredictable, right? You will have a month and you'll go, oh, wow. Or you'll set a vision, right? I know I'm all about setting visions and knowing how to work back from that, right? But there are so many businesses that set lofty goals and targets, particularly in the early years, and they go nowhere near them, and then they beat themselves up. Now, they might have they set those goals, sitting around saying, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
And it's not really coming from any place of knowledge or experience, or, I get we've got to do it, but it can be really.
Yeah. What's the antidote to that?
Well, I think you sort of have to do it, but maybe just temper your expectations in the early years. And the mindset, I don't think the mindset, particularly in professional services, is so much about that. What you're trying to do, and this is sort of how we try and operate, is what is our things like NPS and our corporate, what's the feedback we get from our customers? Is it really, really high? Because if we know that we're hitting really high levels of feedback, that is a win for us. Because we know that long term, they're going to our business will flourish. And so you can focus on growth for growth's sake, or you can focus on relationships and do an outstanding job above and beyond and really make sure that person goes, wow, they're a great operator. I'm going to go back to them whenever I need a hand. Your business is reasonably young, but you wait 5 years, someone who you worked with this year will disappear from the face of the planet. 5 years later, you get a phone call from a major client. And I go, we really want to work with you. And you go, why? And he goes, well, I worked with Jane
back in 2020.
4 years ago. And she loves you. She thinks you're amazing.
Yeah, right.
And you're like, oh. Now, that's weird from an athletic perspective. That's like someone coming up and say, hey, you just won the Ironman because 5 years ago you won the...
Well, you did that one bike ride 5 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because of that one bike ride.
Like, wow. And that's why I find professional services can be a little bit funny because it's sort of hard to predict. I'm sure that the big five, like the Deloittes and the KPMGs of the world, they have far more predictable businesses than smaller professional services. So back to how do you solve this problem of it is an infinite game? So I think one of the interesting things, whenever I walk into an organization, I look on the walls, or if I go and watch an exec team or a boardroom, I love to watch the meetings and hear what they talk about. So as an example, where I was working in this mining business in Africa years ago, it was a big turnaround, and I sat and I watched their management team meeting, and it was like if you had a scale of 1 to 10 of quality of material, like as far as talking about the right things, is the good data, it was probably a 2. Right. If you went quality of energy, like it was sleepifying. That's not a word, I just made it up, but it's like it was like
not great.
It's like 5 p.m. every day. Every day they did 5 p.m. before the end of the day shift, and I was like, holy Christ, you guys do this to yourselves every day? Like this is murder. And so we created this scoreboard. Basically, just like the end of the whole boardroom, we turned into a scoreboard, and it just said, here's our operations. And it just spoke about things like drill and blast and muck and haul and all these things that they have to do at a mine site. And it spoke about the processing plant and maintenance and supply chain and HR and IT and uptime. So all of a sudden, all the data, like the scoreboard was a light, right? And every day we had someone in the business update that. And it was red, amber, greens, and it was like, is it trending up, trending down, and everything like this, right? And then they would come in as an exec team every day. They would come in at 5, in 15 minutes. That was it. No sitting down, stand up, come to the corners. Let's do operational review quickly. So the wall had 3 parts. It had operations, it had strategy, and then it had health, safety, and environment, which being a critical part of a lot in mining, license to operate, right? And so it was just fascinating watching them all of a sudden gather around, and we did exception reporting only. So if the numbers were good, right, within acceptable levels, no problem, don't even talk about it.
Yeah.
But if it's trending down and into red, or if it was red and trending up into green, we want to know about it. And so what that did is that everyone started to work the numbers a lot more. And then we built that for another level down of the operators within the mine. So we just got closer to the numbers, and we just speak about statistics and scoreboard, right? Statistics being your lead numbers. And in business, you've got to look at your lead a lot more than your lag. So the number of people that walk in the door and ask, so what are the new leads in the business? How many of those we got? You know directly that that's going to relate to the bottom of the funnel on actual sale.
Yep.
Right? What's our conversion rate? What is the quality of that lead? Because you might be wonderful to have 10 people walk in the door, but if 9 of them aren't your ideal customer, that's a pain in the ass.
So not reflective.
Yeah, it's not who you want to work with, right? So therefore, your marketing efforts or whatever you're doing, something's not working, right? So what I would say is get closer to your lead metrics, because that's your stats during a game, right? And then when you get to the end of the month or end of the quarter, you've got to sit down and celebrate what you've won. That's the end of the match. Finish the match, start again, game on. Next month is January. And that's as close as I think you can get. It's a different game.
It is I guess that's the point, right? It's a different game.
It's a different game. If you don't have any sort of thing at the end of the year in particular, where you properly sit back and reflect and go, good, bad, ugly, where's my reset? So if you don't have an operating rhythm around it, so we talk about building an operating rhythm that goes annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily. Halfway down the pyramid, if you can imagine a pyramid, halfway down is the difference between strategy and ops. So that's with the monthly.
Got it.
Right? So
that's the flip.
That's the flip. Below monthly is weekly, that's all ops, right? What job we got, like work in progress, all this kind of
About 3 months, quarterly, yearly.
Monthly is strategy.
Monthly is strategy.
Monthly, well, it depends how big you are, but normally I would say monthly is strategy execution meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You have a bunch of strategies in your business that you're trying to execute right now. What are those priorities? Who's in charge of that project? Who's the sponsor? What did we do last month? What's coming next month? Are we red, amber, green on timelines, budget, resources, etc.? Right? You go up to quarterly and annual, and that's when you're setting the strategy, reviewing that as a team, going away. Okay, we're away now. This is great.
Offsite, yeah.
Offsite. Get out there, get a campfire going, bond with each other, and talk about how you're going to win the game. Bond, spend time together, talk about the stuff that's festering away we got to fix, get a plan, come back, execute. So at the exec level, not only looking at operational metrics, but you're looking at strategy execution. And if you can get to the end of a year and you have, like, let's say you've got 3 or 4 pillars in your business, and it might be something like operational excellence and technology transformation and customer at the heart and people and culture, or whatever it is. Like, there's only about 9 or 10 of them, right? If you've got 2 or 3 projects under each of those and they all get done, that is a business that is seriously improved. If you're a big business, I'm hoping there's a lot more than that. Yeah. And then you can sit there and go, okay, so there's an old model we talk about with numbers that goes COPS, commercials, operations, people, strategy. There's your numbers, right? So think about lead and lag from a purely operational level, and then strategy execution. If you look into the year and go, wow, we are green on most things, that's a killer year. That's premiership, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll have years when it looks pretty red.
Yeah.
Right? And that's tough going when that happens.
Talk to me about you and where you've come from.
Look, I'm just a normal bloke that came out of Brisbane, went to school, went to uni, was not really that. Like, I think I did everything with probably a bit easily. It wasn't hard. I didn't excel. I just loved sport. That's all I ever wanted to do. Every sport under the sun. And I was pretty good at most, but didn't really master any. Then I hit the work. After I did university, I did a simple business degree with no contact hours, and I was out and gone, and I travelled the world for years. And I just backpacked.
Right.
And I hit remote parts of the world, and I did van tours around Europe with my mates, and I sort of just partied and travelled for Australia. It was great. I was really good at that.
Yeah.
And then it just gets boring after a while. Like, I did it for 6 or 7 years, and then eventually I just finally came to a place where a mentor said to me one day, things had started to go a bit pear-shaped on a few fronts, on a personal front, a work front. I wasn't really winning. I was totally in cruise mode. And this mentor of mine took me for a walk one day. I was living in Canada, up in Calgary. Took me for a walk one day, and I remember we're walking through the freezing, it was like -30, off to Timmy Ho's for breakfast, for a coffee. And he says to me, hey, Greg, look, you're a good young guy, lots of talent, but fuck me, man, you're lazy. And I was like 26, right? And I went, and it really hurt, like it really stung.
Because it was true.
Totally, yeah. It stung for 2 reasons. One, it was true, and he was right. Sorry. I liked him. I trusted him.
Yes.
I really respected
valued
him.
his opinion.
He was really deeply read. The most studied guy I've ever met, probably still to this day. His library is just enormous. And he's read it all. He was like the moment that said, okay, there's more to this kid, which is about right. At 26, a guy starts to grow up because your brain's finally finished developing. Yeah, that set me on a process of, I became a self-help junkie. And I think in 2007, I read 100 books. I just went nuts. And then I realised what I had been doing in my career was completely unfulfilling and not me. It just did not fit. And so I wasn't motivated. The reason I wasn't motivated is because I could do it pretty easily, but I had no interest.
Yeah, right.
I fell into a course. So I searched, one of the guys that I listened to a lot back in those days was Tony Robbins. And I liked Tony, but I wasn't anything like him. And I went, well, who taught Tony? Because Tony will teach me Tony, and I don't want that. So I went to the guys that taught him. And I studied like really, really, really in depth with them as much as you possibly can, and learnt that whole world of neurolinguistics from the founder, or one of the founders, advanced hypnosis, all the works, right? Years with those guys. And that gave me a core skill set initially that was immediately powerful, and it just fit my thinking patterns. Like it was like, I went, this is me.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow, like I'm a natural at this. It makes sense to me. Maybe it's because like my dad's a teacher, my sister's a teacher. I'm sort of a teacher. That's all I do, right? Just a coach. Another word for the same thing. It just fit. And then I had to work out how to turn that into a business. But like honestly, in 2008, I started coaching. I went straight into semi-pro sport. And 2009, I had my first CEO client. It's just like that. It just went, click, I got it. This is me.
Yeah.
Natural. They gave me an incredible skill set. Don't get me wrong, that was the great gift.
Mm-hmm.
Would not be where I am today without it.
And then talk to me about the expansion, or at least the growth.
In the early days, I really didn't know what, so I knew there's a thing called a performance coach, but that actually could mean anything.
Yeah, sure.
It could really mean, it could be physical, it could be mental. But I was really starting to go across the system as a whole, the technical, tactical, physical, mental, social side of what does performance look like as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
That really fascinated me because when I looked at a lot of the self-help books, they were all one-dimensional. Very, very few gave you hey, this is the performance system.
As a whole.
Mm-hmm. And so when you look at performance, so that's really what I do a lot of now. I try and help individuals and companies build the performance system, right? And so I coach a lot of the parts of that. Mm-hmm. But when I go and look at an organization and I help them assess their business, that is one of the things we do is what is the whole system here and how is it fitting together, right? When I started out, I didn't really understand all that. That just taken, all these years to get to that place. And so I was doing, starting out and doing some enduros, a bit, nothing to your level, but some ultra marathons. And I went and lived in China with the Shaolin monks and did all sorts of kung fu. And I was just sort of practicing and trying things out. I'd had some one-to-one clients. I did no group work back then. And it just sort of struggled through, but had enough clients, did all right. Then probably a few things happened. One, I started getting these gigs in African mining with this group of Australian executives. And that was so formative because you go from coaching a few hours a week to coaching 40, 50 hours.
Weeks on end.
Yep. And you're coaching weeks on end. And so the volume of coaching was through the roof. The level where I was constantly in boardrooms with high stakes environments, coaching guys before they go in to negotiate with the prime minister of a country, coming out, giving me feedback, trying something else, just this, being in all sorts of environments where you really have to be on your game, or coaching, literally I'll be doing that one day and 3 days later I'm a mile underground coaching guys who are doing diamond drilling and trying to help them set up their scorecards and scoreboards and all that kind of stuff. So just the variety of that was really fascinating. And then through this period, I was doing this better business called Neurosport, and that was what business could learn from sport and what sport could learn from business. So I spent a lot of time in that, ended up working at the Queensland Reds as a high performance coach. And then eventually I came to this place where I went, there's a bit of a niche here that I think needs to be filled, and I'm really passionate about it. And that's the final step to the exec team and executive performance. So that C-suite, CEO, or at one level, how do you go from tactical to strategic, and what's missing? And so that most of our business now is focused on that in more medium to large organizations, that kind of space.
Yeah. What's your view on the beer commercial dream of retirement, of the end place where we're all working hard, and what drives us? We operate a business, we operate an existence where I think the society's position is that challenge or difficulty is something to avoid or is a negative connotation. And if we're trying to get to a place to retire, let's say, so we can live on the beach, if we had all opportunity and all money, that we'd all just live on the beach and have beers of an afternoon. But to your point with your overseas travel, it becomes unfulfilling.
Totally.
And so then by working backwards from that, then you need the challenge. You need it to, and that's why we push envelopes. That's why we push for high performance and go, okay, what is possible here? Because being safe there's no satisfaction in being safe.
It's boring.
Yeah.
No, I don't think humans are really designed for that. I think our psychology is not designed for that. I think we are all about the ebb and flow, effort recovery. Right, we as human beings, our biology is designed for effort recovery. And I think we are designed to push. You and I, I'm sure, are very aligned on this, given your history and your whole style of life. I look at people who are unchallenged, and you can see there's a flatness to them.
Mm.
If do you know the inflow model by Mihaly? It just has this. It's a really simple framework, and it has two axes. And on the x-axis, it says skill, and on the y vertical axis, it has challenge. And what we know is in the top right, where the challenge when your challenge is high and the skill is high, that is where flow exists. And flow is when you are completely silent on the inside. It's open peripheral vision, the body in full momentum. You're quiet. You are just in the zone, right? Nailing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know that as the challenge, right, stays high and your skills drop, you go through worry into anxiety and overload, right? Now, if you want to get better at something, what do? You ratchet up the challenge compared to your skill set. So you're naturally going to go towards worry. Okay? Now, other way around, of course, is if you drop the challenge but keep the skill high, you'll go towards boredom.
Bored, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, what actually happens is you get into flow and you can't stay there. You know why? Because you get better. Right?
It's a moving piece.
You don't get there and stay there. You either ratchet up the challenge in the skill and get up to level 3, right? Or you don't, and you go down to boredom. You don't stay there, right? And so and performance lifts, and this is why performance lifts have that sort of up plateau, either a dip or straight up to the next level. But it's why you're plateauing, and you got to talk about periodization and all that kind of stuff to drive your expertise up. Or your level of mastery. So I believe this more and more as I get older, that we live in, like, trying to live a simple, calm, easy life. I just don't know. You see so many more executives working way, way later than they used to. I had dinner last week with a guy in Sydney. He was CEO for something like 30-something years of up to FTSE 100 companies, some of the biggest companies in the world. He's been on the board of everything from AMP to HCF to ASIC. Look, the guy is an insurance and finance industry titan. He is massive. He's 72 and he's still on 4 boards. He just took on a new board role in Malaysia.
Right.
Why? Loves it. And he knows if he doesn't do it, he'll go batshit crazy.
Yeah, be bored.
He will be bored. He'll do it all for free. Like, I'm sure he'd take some money, but
sure,
I know he would do it for free. I think what actually does happen, which is very understandable, is if you've got a job you don't really like, and most people don't really love their job, you sort of get to 65 and go, I'm toast.
Yeah.
I don't put my feet up. I'm like, that makes sense. Particularly if you've got a physical job, that's tough. Right? And then I get what retirement is, but I think what a lot of people do is then they shift into, well, how do I serve the community? How do I do some good travel? But the important thing at that point, I think, is make sure that you are still contributing to society and still doing the effort and recovery. There's nothing wrong with being exhausted at 75 because you put a day's work in. Nothing wrong with it. No, I think it's an old school kind of stigma.
What do you think the commonality is on that sort of topic with risk then with these high-performing executives? What can we learn from that and the ability to, A, understand the variables and B, take on that risk? Do you find that they're commonly have a high level of tolerance on that risk side? Listening to a quote from, I think it was Denzel Washington recently, in my ability to binge on motivational YouTube clips, was that...
He can be pretty good, old Denzel.
Yeah. It was a montage. It wasn't just him, though. He's
got some lines.
Yeah, but it was something like, most things in life that truly value comes from risk. And on top of that, the whole position that life is, and I'll digress and come back to the question because I'm really interested, but this whole position that everything is risk, life is risk. And the virtue of that is that we all don't get out of this alive, right? So it's the riskiest game of all.
We're not getting out of here.
No. So we are right at the end.
In a box.
Yeah, but the opportunity cost is risk.
Yeah.
Getting married is risk. Having children is a huge risk. Going for that job, going from here to there is not just the risk of the movement, it's the risk of the not movement, right? Asking that person to go on a date with you is risky, but also doing nothing and sitting, in the corner of the room is risky. So in saying that, what's your impression on the people that you come across your desk and your company who have been ultimately successful in their role or with strategy and with implementation and how they manage that risk?
They don't feel the risk or are scared by it. I just think they just see, well, that could be a downside.
It's a necessary ingredient, you think?
Yeah, I think so. They go, well, that's just normal. I just don't think they feel the fear as much as others do of if something went wrong. I think they're like, oh, fuck it. I just bombed a speech in front of people, or I just got my job wrong. Well, who cares? They just have a go. I don't think they really feel the fear.
Does that change with C-suites and big companies versus founders?
I want to get to, because I think there's a thing around risk that's been going on a lot more in the last 10 years at corporate level risk, which is concerning. The best now, and I will say this is a general thing without what's going on in the last 10 years, is they definitely have a much higher risk appetite, and they are much more comfortable living with uncertainty and risk and unknown. That is absolutely true. They can hold that place of unknown way better than other people who just are dying to know what's going to happen.
Need to know all the variables.
Yep. And I think because what we know about really big senior executives is there's a certain amount of what's called systemic thinking, which is required for excellence.
What's systemic thinking?
Well, being able to see how the system works in all parts together, right? That requires a certain level of IQ. You don't have the IQ, you can't do that. That's just the science just says that, right? You just need the horsepower. Like above a certain level, you can do quality systems thinking. Now, when you can start doing that, you can start to see all the variables operating. If you don't have that, you can't see what's around the corner.
Sure.
You're not seeing how this bubbling over here. Oh, it's not that big. We'll work it out. And they've been through a few cycles. I've seen this before. It's all right. It's not really going to hurt us too much, right? So I think they're much more comfortable. They can see the system. They are really good, have good judgment. And judgment means that they look at all the data. They can see and feel. They look at all the commercial operations, people's strategy. They look at the reports and go, okay, I can see how this system is living and breathing and operating, right? And then they can see where the risk really lies. It's when you can sit back and draw the map of the business, so to speak, or build a diagnostic to sort of look at where the risk might lie, then that's good. What has been going on the last sort of 10 years has been partly because of legislation where directors can be found guilty of things like corporate manslaughter if someone dies in the front line and you're a board member and you've got 5 layers between you, right? So what I'm seeing is a lot of board members in particular have no risk appetite, just be risk-free as opposed to, there's a risk and return. Risk is it's an equation, right?
Yeah. It's
risk and return. And I think a lot of the time we just talk about having no risk. That gets you nowhere. Because there's 2 sides of the equation. On the downside, I can increase the likelihood and I can decrease the likelihood or decrease the impact so that the downside is not so bad. But I can also increase the upside. That's one side of risk people almost never consider.
Yeah.
Right? Increase the likelihood, increase the impact of upside. And then when you're working both sides of the equation from a risk perspective, that's how to think about risk.
Yeah.
Because I go to the roulette wheel, right? Now imagine if I got to the roulette wheel and I could make black more likely. Or if I lost, you only took half my money.
Now we're on.
All right. Let's go. That's how Branson thinks about it too. He just talks about he says trying to have as little downside as possible, but you got to have downside. This has to be.
That's the equation.
The guy's running planes.
Yeah. That's the necessary equation for upside.
Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. As a general rule of thumb, for people who aren't in the C-suite position, what's the biggest takeaway that we could implement into our lives that you've learned to achieve the success that we want to achieve?
Well, I would say if you think go back to what we spoke about with performance theatres, right? I think mastery and pushing yourself to be better at your skill and at your communication, like what we call your assets, right, as an executive, push yourself hard on that. Get a new level of mastery.
What does that look like?
That means get more skills, learn more things.
You need to understand yourself first, right?
Yeah, you need to understand yourself first. That's absolutely true. I'm maybe talking about just at work getting that stuff done, because the journey to mastery, like if we talk about there's an executive performance model we have that talks about things like your career game plan and the quality of your routines and the quality of your network, the quality of your skills and your track record, right? So this whole method we teach, right, that is underpinned by these three things underneath it: identity, awareness, and your story. They are your core. And if you're not in touch with your personal identity, your values, your personality, your shadow self, the things that spike you, what are the moments of your life that have shaped you, the people that are important to you, and are they around or not? If you're not across that, then you're not really across your psychology at all. Your mental game's going to be weak. Sure. Right. And you will make poor decisions. So from an exec perspective, if you imagine there's this foundational perspective, almost like if you think about this little base plate, and then above that is this arch, right? The base plate is identity, awareness, and my story, and that is what makes you tick. It's your mental game. Got to know that. Then above that, we can work out what's your career game plan and your rhythm and routines and your entourage and your assets and your track record, and we turn all that into a mastery journey. And that mastery journey is worthwhile. Doing the mastery is far less stressful than not having it, because not having it means you get owned at work, you get stressed, you get overloaded. It's tough. Yeah. Do this, it won't be easy, but you'll get better reward and it'll have better ebb and flow and you won't get owned.
And I guess it all comes back to what you started the conversation with: curiosity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Being curious to who you are.
Yeah.
And to your potential.
Absolutely. And
to go down that. And as you say, it's not hard. It's not easy. Unpacking that and working on yourself and taking ownership of that to go, you know what? This is my theatre in this role and this is where I want to excel.
And do the flip side. I'll give you two choices. It's a red pill and a blue pill.
Back to the Matrix. Very good.
Right. Red pill is don't be curious about yourself. Don't be curious about your career. Don't try and master anything. Don't try and build your track record.
How does that play out?
Yep. I can tell you how that works.
Yeah. You're in Alberta, up in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, getting owned, right?
Yeah.
Having someone tell you you're lazy, right? Over here, you might as well be curious. Now, there's actually a bit of a continuum in between, because people can be somewhat curious.
Sure.
And they go through phases, ebbs and flows and all that. I would just encourage people to be more on I don't know what colour pill this one was.
Red.
The red. Go closer to the red. Be more curious about yourself and your profession. And you got roles in life, right? And so you can achieve mastery in more than one role. Like, we're both dads, and and I sit here and go, well, that's not an easy bloody thing to do. And I get sent podcasts from my wife. I'll listen to this podcast about fathering. I'm like, okay, why not? I don't really know how to do this. I'm just fumbling. But the more I've tried to do better at it and understand that and go, okay, well, what's a bit of a framework here, and what's a little thing, a mantra I can use when times get stressful? How do I do that?
Yeah.
That sort of helps me master that tiny bit. Right. You might as well.
Be curious.
The opposite's just
no good.
Stressful and difficult and depressing.
Greg, this has been great. I've really appreciated it and your time. You've got a wonderfully successful podcast itself, and we'll put the links on it, but it's always nice to talk to someone who is not shy in front of a microphone. It's much easier to deal with.
Oh, thanks, mate.
As an interviewer.
It's good to be here, mate. Thank you for your invite, and well, I wish you every success with this, and you've got a great business. So
we're in the early days.
You are, but
we don't even know what Christmas looks like, or the expectations are pretty low. But to your point, with the whole customer focus on the customer experience, or the the value is that it's so easy, and we've been happily surprised in that first year of trade, but you get caught up with, well, this is the goal now for the next quarter. Why? Well, that's just what the goal is, and it helps, I guess, because it quantitatively puts out what you're trying to achieve.
Yep.
But it does as we go into Christmas. It's like, well, that's the goal, and we may get there.
Yeah.
We may not. If we don't, I'll be filthy.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, actually, you probably should just celebrate the fact what we've been able to achieve. And
and you do amazing work. Like, people can beat up on lawyers, but they don't understand that when someone's very successful or a company's successful, there is this one profession that saves them, that drops the risk out, that protects that downside. And
before we go, the final 5 questions. What does success mean to you?
I think it's living your values. Like, if you're just living in accordance and being congruent with your values, I think that's number one. And then I think it's just being on some sort of mastery kind of journey. I don't care what it is you do, but I look at people who are happy. They are on the ebb and the flow. They are on the effort recovery. They are trying to do, I don't care if it's art, music, whatever.
You're going towards something.
And humans, I think, we're designed to be on the move, and I could be wrong, but that to me is when I get to the day and go, wow, I've done some effort. I've been good at what I've done. I've served people. I've added value here and there. Get down the day and go, that's great. And I get rewarded for it. That's even better, right?
Pretty good day.
Yeah, it's a good day.
Happiness? What does happiness mean to you?
The taste of an icy cold Asahi on Christmas Eve with my wife at the end of the year. Presents under the tree. And I'm like,
I love that. I want to buy an Asahi on Christmas Eve just for that.
It's so good.
You've painted that well.
It's got to be in the freezer for a bit.
Yeah.
And, and the kids are just knocked off. They're excited. The spirit of Christmas is around. You sit back and
I love this time of year, for sure. You would have read a lot, as you said, and you continue to read. But if there was one book that you could recommend,
I should have an answer to this because I asked this in my podcast.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Book or podcast, I say, what's one thing?
Yeah.
It was an early book I read, and it was by these 4 Kiwi guys that traveled the world studying high-performance organizations. And they basically come up with this code, right? And it links organizational team individual, which is the system of high performance. And it is called High Performance. I can picture it, something. I'll send you the link to it.
Okay.
It's actually not easy to get anymore.
Okay.
But this was done through the 80s and 90s. They went to the Yankees. They went to Manchester United. They did the All Blacks, Cricket Australia, Netball Australia. They went to all these amazing clubs and went through all the key things. So on the sports, I'm going to say on the business side, another left field book was given to me when I went into Africa with the CEO. He said, hey, read this. And it's called The Outsiders, 8 unconventional CEOs that beat the market for 20 plus straight years.
Right.
So to get in the book, you've got to beat the stock market for 20 plus years by something like more than 50%. So you've got to be really good for more than 2 decades to get in the room.
Okay.
There's only 8 of them have done it. And this book breaks them down. One's Buffett. Let's see. The others, I know a few of them, but he's the most famous. Yeah. Really good book.
If you could invite 4 people to dinner, alive or who have previously passed, but not friends or family,
okay,
who would you invite? 4 guests.
Jesus, Muhammad, Abraham, and Buddha. Let's settle this once and for all.
Okay.
It's not what I was thinking initially, but
let's go.
Let's just do this.
Let's do it, yeah.
Right, there's been a lot of war and a lot of trouble, and they know a lot about performance. They know a lot about being happy.
Okay, and finally, a guest that you think we should have on the show.
An old colleague of mine at the Reds, Daniel Herbert, is now the chair of Australian Rugby.
Okay.
Which is going through enormous change. It's very topical. Some people love what they're doing, some people don't. But Dan is a very genuine, humble, hardworking, very smart guy. who was a World Cup winning Wallaby and best player in the world in 1999. So has bridged both. CEO of another company called SSKB, Strata Managers. You probably know them.
Mm-hmm.
He's a CEO of them. So he would be an interesting. I had him on a podcast quite a few years ago, but not when the questions you ask are quite different. So I would recommend Dan. If he's up, he's ever got an office here on the coast for SSKB.
Yeah.
So maybe you could say when you're up here
next,
drop by.
Greg Layton, thank you so much for your time, mate.
My pleasure, Richard.
That was another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. Next time you're addressing the board, turn to the CEO and let them know all about the show. It really means a lot. Until next time, peace.